Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time we're going to look at the latest version of ReactOS. This is a free open source operating system that's designed to run Windows applications and to use Windows drivers. I last reviewed ReactOS back in 2018, and whilst it's still in alpha, progress does continue to be made. So let's go and take a closer look. Right, here we are on the ReactOS website, where it asked us to imagine running our favourite Windows applications and drivers in an open source environment. More specifically, as the ReactOS README file explains, ReactOS is an open source effort to develop a quality operating system that's compatible with applications and drivers written for the Microsoft Windows NT family of operating systems. So, ReactOS is an open source operating system for running older, or what we may call classic, Windows applications. The project's been running since 1996, and if we look in news, like that, we can see a new version was released in March 2025. Version 04.15 included many improvements, they're all listed down here: rewrites to plug and play, audio support, memory management, cache control, registry healing and caching, security, various system tool and accessory things, and improvements to the shell. And in case you're wondering, ReactOS is legal because its code's been written from scratch using techniques such as cleanroom reverse engineering. So, ReactOS is an operating system that can run Windows applications, but which does not contain any Microsoft Windows code. So, let's go to Download, where we can obtain either a live CD image that can be used to boot ReactOS from external media on compatible real hardware, or a boot image which can be used to install ReactOS either in a virtual machine or on compatible real hardware. And right now, not all real hardware is compatible. It's also worth noting that the version of ReactOS that these links provide access to is 32-bit. A 64-bit version of ReactOS does exist, but it's far more experimental and currently lacks the compatibility layer needed to run 32-bit Windows software. But if we go down to nightly builds, like that, and we select to find, for example, a boot CD for the 64-bit version, like that, we do come across a file, so there is an image available of 64-bit ReactOS for those willing to experiment. But right now we're going to stick with the 32-bit version, and we'll start with the live CD. Here we can support the project if we wish, and we're then taken across to SourceForge. And as you can see, I've already downloaded both the live and boot images of ReactOS, so I won't do it again. And so let's go back to the desktop and bring up the Lena Etcher, where I've selected the live CD image and also a USB drive. So let's click on Flash to create our live USB drive. And you can of course use other imaging software if you wish. Right, here we have our ReactOS Live USB drive, which I've tried on several computers. And sadly, it won't boot on my i5-10400 test rig, nor on my Intel 14100F system. Meanwhile, on my Ryzen 5 600G PC, the USB drive was bootable, but the system prevented it from running and displayed this message. However, do not fret, as all works just fine on this old laptop, which is an Acer Aspire 1725 with a dual-core 1GHz AMD C60 CPU. ReactOS also have a web page of systems known to be compatible, and this is very much a list of older hardware. So let's insert our USB drive somewhere around here like that. I have to have a power lead connected to this laptop because the battery is long since dead, but if we open it up like this and power it up, there we go, and I can show you the display like that as it starts to boot, hopefully. Is it going to work? It's alive, always good to see. Can the system now boot up ReactOS? I hope it can, and yes! And there are various boot options as we can see, and in fact if we press F8 there's even more boot options, but I think we'll just start ReactOS normally, like that. And there we are, it's booting. Very exciting. Let's speed on through though until something even more exciting happens. And here we are, it's installing devices, sorting itself out. And now we need to select a language, which we will do here. Can we go up and find English UK? We can. And the keyboard layout is now fine, so let's click on Next. And we'll select to run a ReactOS Live CD. And here we are on the desktop. Presumably down here we've got a Start menu, similar to Windows, very similar to Windows. Look, what programs are pre-installed. Various things here. Multimedia stuff. Calculators here, various system tools it looks like. We've got Notepad down there. Look, let's launch Notepad. That looks rather like Notepad. I think I saw Paint down there and accessories as well. Yes, we've got Paint, we've got WordPad too. Oh, this is exciting. Not brilliant graphic support as we can see, but this is exciting. This is what proper computing used to look like, isn't it? What else have we got down here? We've got, oh look, games. Have we got? Yes, we've got Solitaire. Well, ReactOS has got my vote then already. We've got Solitaire. We can do something useful on the computer. We can play Solitaire to our heart's content. But there we are. I will resist doing so when it is possible. No, I'll do a couple of cards, look, just to prove the operating system is working. This is a test, very important test. Anyway, we're not going to get very far. Yes, we will quit the game. Thank you very much. We're not going to get very far on this live system. It proves a point, but beyond that, there's not a great deal we can do here on the live system. And so what we're now going to do, so we can check things out more thoroughly, is to install ReactOS in a virtual machine. Right, here we are back in Linux Mint on my i5-10400 test rig. I've already extracted the ISO file we need from the bootcd ReactOS file I downloaded, so let's bring up VirtualBox. There we go, and note that whilst here we're running in Linux, what we're about to do will work just fine in VirtualBox on a Windows PC or indeed a Mac. Before we begin, it's worth noting that there were some issues running ReactOS in VirtualBox versions 6.144 to 7.014. But these problems now seem to have been sorted, and I've not experienced any issues testing ReactOS using VirtualBox 7.016 and above. So let's create a new virtual machine, and we'll call it ReactOS, and we'll select our ISO file. There it is in downloads and ReactOS, and there we go. And VirtualBox has guessed this is like Windows 32-bit, and we'll leave things like that and click on Next. ReactOS advise only to allocate one CPU core to the virtual machine, so we'll leave this setting on one CPU core. And we'll give it a reasonable amount of memory. No point going above 4 gigabytes, given it's a 32-bit machine, but we'll leave it on the 4 gigabytes. And the minimum that has to be allocated is 256 megabytes. So let's again click on Next, and I'm going to take down the size of our virtual hard drive. Let's take it down to say 10 gigabytes. No point allocating too much to ReactOS. And again, we'll click on Next, and there we are. We can click on Finish. So let's now double click to boot up our virtual machine and to get rid of the messages in VirtualBox. And things have got a little bit small to view on the screen here. I'm going to go into the machine settings, and we'll go to display, and we'll put this up to 200%. Let's see if that works. Yes, that makes things a little bit easier to work with, doesn't it? And so we'll handle things like that. I'll select English United Kingdom, and it's telling us to press enter to install or upgrade ReactOS. So I'll press enter and enter again to continue ReactOS setup. For now, I'll leave the settings there as they are. I think they'll be okay. And we'll press enter to install ReactOS on the selected partition. We then need to confirm a quick format. And once more again. And we'll take the default option for bootloader installation. So we're nearly there. We'll choose the default directory. That is fine. And oh look, we're copying files. So let's speed on through. And we now need to reboot. And here we are booting into ReactOS and its setup. So I'll click on next there. That is fine. Can we move this up a bit? We can. Good to see all these open source projects acknowledged. We'll keep with the default options, I think, and also here again. I'll put my name as EC. We'll create an administrator password. Something simple, this is just a test. Date and time are fine. I think we'll go for the classic appearance, I always like that. And we'll select typical settings. Here we won't choose to be a member of a domain. And there we are, it's registering components and finishing installation. So once again we need to restart. And oh, it started the installer again. I forgot about this. What we have to do is to go to our optical drives and we'll take out the image of ReactOS. It's just rebooted from that. So we will press F3 to quit here and quit with F3, and this will now enable us to reboot. And this time we should boot into our installed virtual machine. So we'll select that. Things seem okay. And there we are. It now wants to install a driver. That's fine. We'll let it do that. And we'll finish that. Didn't like that. Never mind. And we haven't yet got everything working quite right in terms of display, not least because I've set 200% scaling, but we also haven't got installed VirtualBox Guest Editions. So we'll go up to Devices and insert the Guest Editions CD image. And if we now go to my computer, there we are. There is the VirtualBox Guest Editions CD. And this was one of the things that caused a lot of problems in some versions of VirtualBox, but it now seems to work okay. So I should be able to just now run VirtualBox Guest Editions, like that, and install, after which, guess what, it wants to reboot. And there we are, it seems to be working. We'll tell a little bit if we do that. Yes, Guest Editions must be working, it's rescaling the display. Let's just do a view in a full screen mode, and won't show that message again, and switch. Yes, this is working rather nicely. We are running ReactOS 04.15 in a virtual machine. And I would point out we're doing so with a 200% scaling in VirtualBox, which makes things easy to see here on video. But if I just right-click the desktop and do properties here, we can just prove that. Let's just go across to settings. Yes, you can see we're running a resolution of a 960 by 540. And I'm going to leave things like that for this video so we can see things more clearly, but there's nothing to stop you going back into the settings for VirtualBox, setting the scaling to 100 and running, for example, at 1920 1080. Greetings, here I am back again, and I'm sure you want to see some software running here in ReactOS. And as you might have noticed, there is a browser pre-installed. It's called Wine Internet Explorer, and I think this is because whilst the Wine project and the ReactOS project are quite distinct, they do share some resources where appropriate, and hence we have a Wine Internet Explorer. And this defaults to Google, as you can see, but it can go to other places like explainingcomputers.com, and it works. Although if we go to a more complicated website, like for example YouTube, this is as far as we get. It can't display a website like that. And I don't think ReactOS is an operating system you'd install for doing things like web browsing. I imagine more you'd have it installed in a virtual machine as we have here, and you'd be doing your web browsing in your host operating system, and you'd be using ReactOS to run Windows applications that you couldn't run over in your host operating system if, for example, it was Linux, as here. Talking of Windows applications, there is an Applications Manager also included with lots of applications that can be installed under lots of different categories: audio, video, games and fun, internet, office, engineering, finance, drivers, all kinds of things. And under graphics, there's even an early version of Blender. And earlier I installed this and it does work. You probably noticed it's sitting here on the desktop. If we run it up, there's an error at the start. There we are because of graphics issues. Perhaps not surprising. But other than that, we are running an early version of Blender here in ReactOS. And I will point out that here everything is very stable. Certainly compared to the first time I ran ReactOS, I haven't had the system crashing on me at all. And I've also tried installing applications myself as you would in Windows. For example, earlier I mounted the ISO file for Microsoft Office XP and managed to install Microsoft Office XP. There were a few foibles early in the process, but I just clicked through them and everything seemed to work, and the installation completed successfully. And so therefore, if we go down to the Start menu here, you will see we have got Microsoft Word, and it works on this system. We have got Microsoft Excel, and again it works on this system. We have got PowerPoint down there. So this is useful stuff. We have got even Microsoft Access, although this has got a few issues, I think. If I try to make a blank database, we'll call it that, and it gives us an error, which is a bit of a problem. But other than that, we are running useful software here in ReactOS. And I've also managed to install Adobe Audition. That installed flawlessly. And if we go back to the menu, you might have noticed that was sitting there as well. There is Adobe Audition 1.5. And I've got here, I think, a sound file. Here's an early alternative version of the Explaining Computers music. Shall we see if it'll play? Yes, it'll play, no problems at all. And of course, this indicates as well that audio is working here in ReactOS. And so overall, I'm quite impressed. There seems to be great progress installing and running 32-bit Windows applications here in ReactOS. ReactOS has the potential to become an important niche operating system. Right now, it's still far from complete, and whilst I told you in the last segment of the video that it hadn't crashed during my application testing, which was true, I then spent a couple of hours trying to install this tablet, and that resulted in some spectacular crashes, not just in my attempts to install the driver, but also when browsing around in the device manager. This said, we mustn't forget that ReactOS is still in alpha, and I look forward to the further development of ReactOS in the future. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.